Chief Policy Advisor in EU Affairs and Corporate Law of Finnish Commerce Federation, Ilari Kallio. Ilari, hello from Riga.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to the seminar. I hope you can hear me at the moment, and soon I hope you'll see my presentation as well.
Hopefully, we are interested in seeing this and hearing this one. So, Ilari, I will not take long your time, and so the stage is yours, and we are open to see and hear what you're going to say at us.
Thank you. So, hello, I'm happy to be here and going to discuss a bit about the family leave and childcare schemes in Finland and how we think that they help with the, let's say, work-life balance or even equality. So this is, of course, something that has been developed in the Nordics for a long time, and I hope I can shed some more light on the background of the discussions, where we are heading at the moment, and what maybe you could learn from this. So if we start my presentation, then, well, there's the whole title. It's rather long, and I only have a few slides, and I'm not going to concentrate too much on them. They include a lot of text, but that's for the purpose of you to then afterwards go through the numbers. I'm a lawyer, so I'm not very happy to go through numbers. But let's start by going to the next slide. Here, in a nutshell, you see the current structure of family leaves and childcare schemes in Finland. And if you look at the numbers on the left side, I'm not going to go through them all, as I said, but overall, those add up to, if you look at the maternity leave, paternity leave, and parental leave, those add up to about 9 months of family leave at the moment. And as you can see, the fathers, they have their own share of those leaves already, meaning that they cannot give the paternity leave to the mother. Parental leave at the moment can be taken by either of the parents, but as we'll see, unfortunately, it's usually always mothers. Why I say unfortunately, we'll come to that later on. Then what we also have in Finland, on top of this, I would say almost traditional family leaves, is childcare leave. That means that you can stay at home, one of the parents can stay at home with the child until the child turns 3 years of age, which is rather long time. In a way, it could be good, but in a way, from the labor market perspective, and also in an equality perspective, that is not always a good thing. On top of this, and then we have also partial childcare leave. That means that you can stay at home. And then if we look at all these different types of leaves, what is common to them is that, of course, if you are employed when you go for a leave, you preserve your employment while you are at the leave. So, and in fact, it's illegal to lay off someone who is on a parental leave or childcare leave. For the allowances, in very short, the allowances in Finland are rather good. For maternity leave, you get 90% of your pay, or a bit less if you are a high earner. So there's a kind of a cap for the 90% allowance, but even then, for the income above that level, you get some. So it's rather good. Then for paternity parental leave, you get 75% of your pay. And then for childcare leave, there's a fixed sum. On top of these, which are based in legislation, although often they are, or some elements of them are negotiated by social partners, these are all the elements that are based in law. Then you have collective agreements, which grant the employee full pay depending. For maternity leave, it's usually something between 1 month and 3 months. So meaning that the employer pays the difference between the allowance and the full pay. And then for fathers, it's shorter. It's often six days, meaning 1 week. The other side of the equation is then the childcare services. And as was mentioned earlier, in fact, in Finland, no one is saying that this would be a problem cost-wise or otherwise to have childcare services. And that's most likely because all children under school age have a subjective right to childcare, meaning that it doesn't matter if the parents are employed or unemployed, the child has a right to find a place in a kindergarten. Childcare is provided by private service providers, and you have to pay for it, but you have to pay for it very little. In fact, if you have very small income in the household, then you pay nothing. Even for high earners, that's the maximum is about 300 euros per month, meaning that it's often this is not the threshold or some kind of a hindrance to put your child in childcare if you so decide. There's also a third option, meaning that if third option, I mean there's the childcare leave, there's the childcare services. There's also this possibility to hire someone to look after a child, and then you get a small allowance, or I would call it allowance from the state, which you can use partially to cover the pay of the child carer, the private child carer. And then finally, there's a pre-primary education, which is compulsory for children under just a year before starting their school. So this is where we are now. And now some good and bad elements, or I would say bad, but elements that we could improve in the future. First of all, the possibilities are widely used, but not evenly. So while nearly all the mothers use the maternity leave, the whole of it, and about 80%, just under 80% of fathers take some paternity leave, and there still are around one father out of 5 who doesn't take any leave when the child is born. And of course, this is something that could be changed and should be changed, in our opinion. What is more worrying that of the parental leave, which is freely allocated, mothers use 97 to 98% of the parental leave. And why is this? Part of it is because the families think that, okay, usually the father is the higher earner. And then if the father takes the leave, then the family is losing out on the income. But as we saw, the allowances are quite high, so often this is not the case. At least the difference is not as big as people think. And then there are the earned attitudes. So it's still, although we claim to be, and I would say we are quite modern in a way, but there's still the problem that we often think also in the Nordics, in Finland, that, okay, it's a father who should go to work, it's a mother who should stay at home if someone is staying at home. What's a good thing is that then childcare services are attended by more than 3/4 of children between ages 1 to 6 years old. Altogether, family leaves and childcare services do support women's employment, but there are problems with this, and they have to do with equality. So in Finland, yes, the women are employed to a high rate. Yes, they do have full-time jobs, but there are still shortcomings compared to men. And one of the glaring ones is that what the statistics show is that when men get children, or when the family gets a child, the income level of the man doesn't change. So it's more or less the same. It can even improve in the long run. While for women, often the case is that after having children, the development of their income from work goes down, and for different reasons. Either they are not promoted, either it's because they have a long break from work. There are many factors counting into it. And what's the final outcome? The women lose out even when they retire, because retirement or the pensions are the occupational pension in Finland are based on the accrued rate, which is calculated from the salaries. So if you earn less when you're working, you have a smaller pension. And that is not a good thing, of course. So career and income prospects are still hampered by the leaves, or how the leaves are used by families. And then there's one quite particular problem, which is the so-called welfare traps, meaning that when one of the parents is at home with the child, you get these different benefits. You may need to pay less for some public services, which you have to pay for. And once you get a job, you lose out on these benefits. You have to pay more for the services, and all of a sudden, all the extra income that you should have had from the job, you don't have it, or it's very small. In some very luckily quite few cases, you end up paying more than you were paying before you took up a job. And of course, this is something that we are trying to solve. It's not only a question about the childcare services and not only a question about family leaves, but it's more of a question of how you organize the whole social security. So it's a bit beyond today's seminar. But as we can see, there is the equality elements all the time. So how do we make sure that women would be equal compared to men? And I'm meaning our mothers and fathers in the labor markets, and also young women, because sometimes there are cases where, of course, young women are hesitant to start a family, and young men as well, because they're not sure how it's going to affect their careers, their income level, etc., etc. So what we are doing in Finland at the moment is that there will be a revision of this family leave scheme, and that the proposal just came out a couple of weeks ago when this tripartite working group between employers, employees, and the government ended their work. Unfortunately, they were not unanimous, and I'll tell you why. So one of the main elements of the reform is that there will be a pregnancy leave, separate from maternity leave, or it's kind of a new paternity leave, maternity leave, but that's only for the time before the child is born, or around the time child is born. Then there's the parental leave, which will be 160 working days per parent until the child is 2 years of age, so meaning that you don't have to take all the parental leave consecutively. You can have it in smaller parts. I think it's 4 parts. And there's like 3 weeks during which the parents can be at home at the same time. So pregnancy leave and parental leave, so in altogether 6 weeks when both the parents can be at home together with the child. As we can see there now on the screen, it's around 100 days of the parental leave per parent are earmarked, and then there's still 60 plus days which are transferable. And this is one point where the employers have been critical, because as we saw, if the mothers at the moment use 97 to 98% of all the parental leaves, they will be using 97 to 98% of these 63 days, which means about 10 weeks. Childcare leave will stay in place. This is also something that the employers have been critical, because when you have the childcare leave as an option, it often leads to a situation where the women or the mothers stay out of the labor market for 3 years, and that will have an effect on your career. So in fact, what the employers were proposing was that, okay, all the parental leaves should be earmarked, and the childcare leave should be only available until the child is 1.5 years of age. I know there are differences within the families, how you think of whether it's better for the child to stay at home longer or shorter period. Usually in Finland, young children go to the kindergarten when they are about 1 year old. Allowances for the leaves, they are more or less the same as they were. There's a bit of a hike in the early days of parental leave. Some of the criticism, as I said, it's still quite likely that it's mostly the women, the mothers, who will be using the extra days that are transferable, meaning that, well, their situation relative to the fathers is not improved. It's also then happens that the fathers are not taking a bigger role in childcare. And, well, meaning that the mothers' labor market status will not improve. This is something that the employers would have wanted to change. And here I have to give a bit of history. Still 10 years ago, the employers thought that, okay, it's up to the families to decide how they divide the parental leaves, especially if you ask the industrial sectors where the employees are predominantly men. And in fact, that's one problem of the Finnish system, is that the segregation in the labor market is still quite high. You have more women working for the public sector, more men for the private sector. Between occupations, there are huge differences. Luckily, times have changed, and now all the employers together think that, okay, the costs, the possibilities of parenting should be more equally divided between the employers as well as between the parents. Because, of course, in the end, it's somehow, one way or the other, it's the employers paying for the time off. So we think that we are not going in the right direction, unfortunately, with this reform of the family schemes in Finland, because it's more expensive than it was. It doesn't help women to get their foot in the labor market earlier after having a child. As a conclusion, I would say the role of law and collective agreements. How you look at this? It's clear that the law can steer people in the right direction. Sometimes the attitudes change quite slowly, so that the family leaves, for instance, could be earmarked to make it more likely that the fathers use them. Because there is evidence that long leaves increase gender pay gap, gender income gap, and hamper women's career advancement. The social partners have a role in this, but this is of course very much depending on the country where you look at. So social partners in Finland have traditionally a very strong role, meaning that they do have sector-level collective agreements. They are a member of participating in the tripartite work. We don't have national collective agreements anymore, but the sector ones are quite widely spread, so that about 90% of Finnish employees are covered by a collective agreement or another. And then, of course, more and more, as the discussion how much the workplace level organization of work, flexible work arrangements, flexi time, etc., are handled on a workplace level, meaning that you can have a contract, you can have a employer policy, you have other options, but meaning that all the different levels of the system do have a role in advancing gender equality, also work-life balance. But it's up to the countries decide how, and of course the Nordic model is one example, but sometimes I think that the Nordic model, at least the Finnish model, is still up to date, but it risks being too stiff or too old-fashioned for the modern days of working, where flexi-time, telework are becoming more and more, let's say, common. Even after the COVID, it's quite likely that the situation will be different in the future. So this is, in a nutshell, how we think the employers in Finland think that the regulations on family leaves, on childcare services can really help with equality and work-life balance. And that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kallio, for sharing your Finland's experience, and huge appreciate from our team. And best wishes from Riga to goes to Finland. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I would have loved to be there rather than here in Finland.
Exactly. I would say the same, but the time is how it is, and probably the next year or after 2 years, we're going to meet in a live conference on the place. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.